Welcome to our first ever video lesson of the Stencil course. We gotta go over some fun and basics first before we even dive in. So first off, what I wanna talk to you guys about today is what is a stencil? And I know that may sound like a silly question, but actually there is a big difference between a stencil and a mask. And if you don't know what that is, let's go over it. And in fact, I'm just gonna show you. So here I have just a regular plain piece of paper, and I'm just gonna make a very basic stencil just to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is a stencil, and this is a mask. They're both completely different, but I know sometimes it can get a little bit confusing because masks are usually what people use for stamping, and stamping can sometimes look like stencils. So I just wanted to make sure that we all know exactly what we're talking about when we talk about stenciling. And stenciling is all the paint that we're going to use is going to go inside this heart. Whereas if we are painting with this part would not, everything else around the heart would be painted over. So that's how you know exactly what we're working with when we want our stencil. Next up, I'm going to go over some basic do's and don'ts when we start to dive into the stenciling world. The first one is probably the biggest one, is overloading your brushes. I know that I tend to overload my brushes to get that accent wall done, finished. I don't want to think about it anymore, and I use more paint than really is needed. And we actually don't want to do that in stenciling at all. We want to use so minimal paint. And this is because our paint in stenciling goes a long way. And if you use too much paint, it's going to bleed out inside of your edges, and it's going to look really messy and ugh. Bleed out is when we notice the paint goes above or below the line of our stencil. And this could make our stencil less crisp looking. And normally that's kind of fixable, and it's not normally a big deal. So for example, if we decided to do, I don't know, a blue stencil on a white wall, and a little bit of our blue paint got on our white paint, well, we can just go ahead and touch that up with a little bit of white paint, and you don't even notice it. We're not always going to get the most perfect result, and again, that's because of the material that we will be using. Paint can be a little bit unpredictable at times. To prevent bleed out the best you can, let's always work with minimal amount of paint. Next up, the most common mistake, a don't, if you will, is not connecting your edges. And I'm going to demonstrate exactly what I mean by this. As you guys see here, I have a little curvy O. And I'm not using paint just because I want to show you as quick as possible what I'm exactly going to talk about. Okay, so we have this lowercase o, right? Looks beautiful, but have you noticed what we're missing here? We haven't filled in the O. And this little area really shows that this is a stencil. And sometimes this effect looks great. And you want that rustic, big, bold letter look, then that's great. But this is such a delicate stencil, I think it would be so much prettier if we were able to just fill that in. See the difference here? This looks way more professional, and it looks like this paper came with this O right on top of it. It doesn't look stencils, you can't see the lines, and it just looks, I feel like it looks more professional. So here's a do for you. You would definitely want to make sure that you wash, clean, and take care of your stencils right after use, or as soon as you can. And what I mean by this is I want you guys to have the most bang for your buck when you have these stencils. You know, some stencils are so beautiful, and I want them to last forever. So what you can do is, as soon as your stencil gets dirty, go ahead and head over to the sink and just let it soak in water. I like to use a stencil brush to actually get the paint off of it. The stencil brush already works great with our stencils, and it's actually going to be kind of a clean-in-one type of thing. And I also want to point out that when we go to store our stencils, make sure that they're stored completely flat, they're not on top of anything, and you can even put them in a binder. Or here's a really good trick for you, you can even put them underneath your bed. That way it's out of sight, out of mind, and you can pretty much guarantee that your stencils are going to be perfectly preserved for the next time you stencil. Next up, I'm going to talk to you about some really quick ways to get started with stenciling. I know you guys already know the awesome projects we have lined up for you, but if you're like me, I want to get started right now on a project that I'm really excited about. And maybe by now you've noticed that I've decorated my little set here, and I whipped up this project in no time at all. It was so fun to do, and all I did is I just took brown paper that I had laying around the office, stenciled it with some black ink, and look how gorgeous it came out. In fact, I'm not done here. I have one more amazing, super easy project that I know you guys can start right now. I pretty much guarantee that you guys have everything you need to get started on the Stencil project right in your own pantry. Ta-da! Monogrammed, personalized cookies. Is there anything more delectable than having something that's personalized to your own event or a family get-together?